It had been several years since my mother's passing, and when my father said, "I want you to meet her," my heart tightened, a flutter of unease stirring in my chest. It felt like the past was creeping into my present. Our meeting was scheduled for a Sunday afternoon. "It'll be casual and intimate. You'll really like her," my father said, his voice bubbling with a rare excitement that I hadn't heard in a long time. I arrived early at the restaurant, wearing a simple cream blouse and jeans. I wanted to look approachable, but there was a nervousness creeping into me, as if I was preparing for something far more complicated than I had anticipated. And then she walked in. Sophie was nothing short of striking. Tall, poised, she entered the room like she belonged to another world, one that felt both distant and magnetic. She wore a deep green dress that clung to her figure, her dark auburn hair casually swept back, framing her sharp features. When our eyes met, time seemed to pause. The low murmur of the restaurant faded, and for a single suspended moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the room. "You must be Emma," she said, her voice soft yet strong, carrying a warmth that was both inviting and tentative. "Your father has mentioned you so many times." I stood, offering my hand, though it felt as though I were doing it on autopilot. Her touch was warm, delicate yet firm, like she was silently offering more than just a greeting. I tried to mask the heat rising in my cheeks as I spoke. "Nice to meet you, Sophie." We sat, and my father, as ever, carried the conversation with ease, cracking jokes and speaking with such lightheartedness. But Sophie's attention was on me, and hers was not the casual type of conversation. Every question, every smile, every gaze she gave me felt like it held something beneath the surface, a depth I couldn't quite place but couldn't ignore. The meal passed quickly, and we moved to a quieter corner for coffee. My father excused himself for a phone call, leaving Sophie and me alone. The silence that fell between us felt thick, but Sophie broke it first. "I know this must be strange for you," she said, her voice low, as though trying to bridge the gap between us. I swallowed, unsure of how to answer. "A little," I said, barely above a whisper. Her eyes didn't waver. There was something in the way she looked at me, something knowing and soft, that made the words stick in my throat. "Things will settle with time," she reassured me, her voice barely a whisper, "for both of us." I nodded, my breath catching. The air between us seemed charged, as though something unsaid hung in the balance. What could I say? I wasn't ready to face what I was feeling, not yet. When my father returned, Sophie had slipped back into her familiar, graceful demeanor, sweet, kind, and professional. We said our goodbyes, but as her hand brushed mine, something sparked inside me. It was fleeting, yet undeniable. In that touch, I knew that what had begun today wasn't over. It had only just started. Sophie slowly became a part of our lives, unobtrusively at first. Dinner with my father, weekend breakfasts, outings, they all began to include her. But with each passing day, I became more aware of her presence. It was subtle at first, like the air in a room growing warmer, more delicate. Every time she entered, it felt like the atmosphere shifted, becoming both lighter and heavier in the same breath. I kept telling myself that it was just the natural difficulty of adjusting to a new woman in our lives after losing my mother. I told myself it was normal, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. It wasn't about change, it was her. Every time she smiled, my heart would flutter. Every time she spoke to me, my thoughts would scatter. One evening when my father was away on a business trip, Sophie invited me to dinner, just the two of us. "Come over, dinner's almost ready." Her voice on the phone was gentle, almost coaxing. I should have said no. I should have kept my distance, but the words that left my mouth were yes. When she opened the door, I felt my breath catch. She was dressed simply in a beige sweater and jeans, her hair loose and cascading over her shoulders in soft waves. There was an ease to her presence that made me feel both at home and unsettled all at once. "Come in," she smiled, her voice light and inviting. "Dinner's almost ready." The subtle scent of vanilla filled the air as I stepped inside, comforting like a secret. She had set the table for two in the cozy living room, a single candle flickering gently in the center. The soft glow cast an intimate warmth over the space. We talked about trivial things, work, television shows, vacation plans, but then, without warning, the conversation shifted. She spoke gently of loss, of the challenges of moving forward. I found myself speaking of my mother, of those difficult years when everything felt empty, when nothing seemed to make sense. Sophie listened, her eyes soft, her expression never wavering. She didn't speak, but I felt her understanding without her saying a word. After dinner, we stood together in the kitchen, clearing the dishes. Without thinking, I reached for the same plate as she did. Our hands brushed. Neither of us pulled. Away. It felt like time had stopped. When I looked up, her brown eyes locked with mine. The world outside melted away, leaving only the intensity of her gaze. "Emma," she whispered, her voice like a thread pulling me in. "We didn't do anything." I said, my voice barely audible, my thoughts scattered. But we had. The silence between us said it all. Sophie gently pulled her hand away, her voice almost strained as she said, "Do you want coffee?" I nodded, unable to speak. Every part of me screamed to run, to pull away, but something deep inside me wanted to stay, to explore this uncharted territory with her. That night, I drove home after midnight, my hands trembling on the wheel. I tried to distract myself, radio on, windows down, but nothing could drown out the whirlwind inside me. When I stepped inside my house, everything felt hollow. "She's your father's girlfriend," I reminded myself, trying to find some sense of clarity. This is wrong. But her touch, her smile, her voice, none of it could be erased. The next evening, my father hosted an engagement party. I promised myself I would keep my distance. But as soon as I saw Sophie standing alone, glass of wine in hand, something shifted. Without thinking, I walked toward her. "Is it too loud in here?" I asked, my voice shaky, unsure of my own intentions, sometimes. "It's easier to get lost in the crowd," she said, her voice carrying a weight that spoke of more than just small talk. We stood in silence, the noise of the party a distant hum. And then, inexplicably, I found myself moving closer. Closer until I could feel her breath on my skin. "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely a sound. "We're not doing anything," I said, trying to calm my racing heart. But then, Sophie's hand reached up, her fingers tracing the curve of my cheek. The simple touch sent a rush of heat through me, and in that moment, I knew nothing else mattered. The world, the party, the future, it all vanished. Her lips met mine. At first, it was a tentative, almost hesitant kiss, but then, as if something unlocked between us, it deepened. It became everything unspoken, unacknowledged, forbidden, yet inevitable. Her hands slid to my neck, mine found their way to her waist. The world outside ceased to exist. Only this moment, only her, mattered. When we finally pulled apart, our breaths were shallow, and I felt like I had forgotten how to breathe. Sophie's eyes were filled with a storm of emotions, guilt, relief, longing. That shouldn't have happened. She whispered, her voice trembling, but despite the weight of what we had just shared, part of me knew it had to happen. The part of me that had been longing for something real, something unspoken, had finally found it. Before I could speak, Sophie turned away, taking a few steps before stopping. She looked back at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Your father loves you very much," she said, her voice full of quiet sorrow. "And so do I." She was trying to remain composed, but I could see the cracks in her facade. And as the evening drew to a close, we didn't say goodbye. We simply walked away from each other as if nothing had changed. But everything had. A secret had formed between us, unspoken and hidden. But its presence was undeniable. As I drove home, the cold night air cut through me. But nothing could silence the whirlwind of thoughts racing in my mind. Something had begun. Between Sophie and me, something that I didn't yet understand, but I knew it would change everything. And as confusing as it was, as forbidden as it felt, I wasn't scared because deep down, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Somehow, I was okay with that.